The Cub's Curious Awakening. Chapter 1: The Cozy Den. It was a crisp, white winter morning in the dense forest. The ground was blanketed in a thick layer of pristine snow, glistening under the soft, golden sunlight that peeked through the towering evergreen trees. Nestled deep within the undergrowth, a small bear den remained peacefully undisturbed, sheltering a precious inhabitant within. Inside the cozy den, a tiny bear cub stirred from its long, slumbering hibernation. Its eyes slowly fluttered open, adjusting to the muted light filtering in through the den's entrance. The cub let out a soft yawn, flexing its little paws and stretching its plump body. After months of deep sleep, the young Bruin was finally beginning to awaken. The cub's name was Bee, and she was the newest addition to her bear family. As she blinked away the remnants of her hibernation, Bee could feel the familiar warmth of her mother's thick fur surrounding her. Turning her head, she nuzzled closer to the large, sleeping form of her mother, Ursula, who was still resting peacefully. Bee had been born in this very den just a few months prior, along with her two older siblings, Bjorn and Barrett. The three cubs had spent the entire winter curled up beside their mother, nursing and gaining strength as Ursula kept them safe and warm throughout the long hibernation season. Now, as spring approached, it was time for the little family to emerge from their den and venture out into the wondrous world beyond. Bee couldn't wait to explore the forest that had been her home since birth. With a curious gleam in her eyes, she carefully poked her head out of the den's opening, taking in her first glimpses of the outside world. Chapter 2: A Forest Awakening. The winter landscape that greeted Bee's eyes was a stark contrast to the cozy confines of the den. Vast expanses of pristine white snow stretched out as far as the eye could see, broken only by the towering trunks of ancient spruce and fir trees. A gentle breeze rustled the evergreen boughs, causing a light flurry of snowflakes to drift down around her. Bee's nose twitched as she caught the scent of the fresh, crisp air. It was so different from the familiar smells of her den, the earthy aroma of the decaying leaves and twigs that lined their sleeping area, the musky scent of her mother and siblings, and the sweet milk that had sustained her throughout the winter. Tentatively, Bee stepped out of the den, her tiny paws sinking into the fluffy snow. She let out a small, curious huff, testing the unfamiliar sensation beneath her feet. Slowly, she began to explore her snowy surroundings, peeking out from the den's entrance and taking cautious steps forward. As Bee ventured out, she noticed movement in the distance. Perking up her ears, she spotted a group of small, brown birds hopping across the snow, their chirps echoing through the stillness of the forest. Bee watched them curiously, tilting her head to the side as she tried to make sense of these new creatures. Suddenly, a loud, rumbling sound caused Bee to jump in fright. Whirling around, she saw the massive form of her mother, Ursula, emerging from the den behind her. Ursula let out a low, grunting call, summoning Bee back to her side. Relieved, Bee scurried back to the safety of her mother's warm embrace, nuzzling against Ursula's soft fur. Ursula gave Bee's head a gentle lick, her large, intelligent eyes surveying the wintry landscape. She knew that the time had come for their family to leave the den and begin exploring the forest once more. With a gentle nudge, Ursula coaxed Bee and her two older siblings, Bjorn and Barrett, out of the den, the four bears stepping out into the breathtaking world that awaited them. Chapter 3: A Guided Exploration. As the bear family emerged from their den, Bee couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The outside world was so vast and unfamiliar, a far cry from the small, secure den she had known for the past several months. But with her mother and siblings by her side, Bee knew she was safe and ready to embark on this new adventure. Ursula led the way, her massive paws leaving deep imprints in the pristine snow. Bee and her siblings followed closely, sticking close to their mother's sturdy frame as they took in the sights and sounds of the awakening forest. Every few steps, Ursula would pause, her nose twitching as she scanned the area for any potential threats or sources of food. Bee watched her mother intently, already learning from Ursula's keen senses and vast experience navigating the forest. As they walked, Bee couldn't help but marvel at the beauty that surrounded them. The towering evergreen trees were dusted with a sparkling layer of snow, their branches reaching up towards the bright, azure sky. Bee noticed small, chirping birds flitting from tree to tree, their feathers a stunning contrast against the white backdrop. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Bee's eye. She stopped in her tracks, her gaze fixed on a small, furry creature scurrying across the snow. It was a chipmunk, its bushy tail twitching as it darted between the trees. Bee let out an excited yip, drawing the attention of her siblings, who also paused to watch the chipmunk's energetic display. Ursula turned back, letting out a soft, rumbling sound to calm her curious cubs. With a gentle nudge, she ushered them onward, reminding them to stay focused and vigilant as they explored their forest home. As they continued their trek, Bee became increasingly aware of the abundance of life around her. She spotted the telltale mounds of snow-covered anthills, the industrious insects busily preparing their homes for the changing seasons. Overhead, she caught glimpses of squirrels scurrying along the branches, their fluffy tails trailing behind them. Bee's senses were overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of the forest. Every sight, sound, and scent was new and fascinating to the young cub, who drank it all in with unbridled curiosity. She knew that with her family's guidance, she would have the opportunity to discover the wonders of this incredible world. Chapter 4: Foraging Feats. As the bear family continued their exploration, Bee's focus soon shifted to the task of finding food. The long months of hibernation had left her with a growing appetite, and she could feel her stomach beginning to rumble. Ursula, sensing her cubs' hunger, led them towards a particularly dense cluster of evergreen trees. Bee watched in awe as her mother used her powerful paws to sweep away the snow, revealing a hidden cache of pine cones and nuts that had fallen to the ground. Bee and her siblings eagerly dove into the bounty, their sharp claws and strong jaws making quick work of the tough pine cones and nuts. Bee savored the flavor of the pine nuts, their rich, buttery taste satisfying her hunger. As they feasted, Ursula kept a watchful eye, ensuring that her cubs were safe and well-fed. She knew that in the weeks and months to come, the family would need to forage extensively to replenish the fat reserves they had depleted during hibernation. Nearby, Bee spotted a group of squirrels darting back and forth, their cheeks bulging with the nuts and seeds they had gathered. She watched them curiously, wondering if she and her siblings would one day be as adept at collecting and storing food. Ursula, sensing Bee's fascination, stepped closer to her cub and began to gently guide her through the process of foraging. With her massive paws, the experienced bear deftly uncovered hidden caches of nuts and berries, demonstrating the techniques Bee would need to master in order to survive and thrive in the forest. Bee listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder as she observed her mother's expert movements. She tried to mimic Ursula's actions, swiping at the snow and using her sharp claws to extract the hidden treasures beneath. At first, her attempts were clumsy and inefficient, but with each passing moment, Bee could feel herself becoming more adept and confident. As the family continued their foraging expedition, Bee's excitement only grew. She reveled in the satisfaction of discovering a new cache of food, the thrill of cracking open a tough pine cone, and the joy of savoring the delicious morsels. With her mother and siblings by her side, Bee knew that she was well on her way to mastering the essential skills of survival in the forest. Chapter 5: Brotherly Bonding. After their successful foraging session, Bee and her siblings were feeling energized and eager to explore more of their forest home. As Ursula led them onwards, the three young bears began to playfully chase one another, their joyful yips and growls echoing through the trees. Bee darted between the towering trunks, her short legs carrying her as fast as they could. Bjorn, the largest of the three cubs, lumbered after her, his larger size giving him an advantage in the chase. Barrett, the smallest and most agile of the trio, weaved in and out of the undergrowth, nimbly evading her siblings' attempts to catch her. As they ran, the cubs would occasionally pause to playfully swat and nip at one another, their sharp little teeth and claws testing the limits of their strength. Bee relished these moments of playful interaction, reveling in the camaraderie and bond she shared with her siblings. Ursula observed the cubs' antics with a knowing gaze, her large eyes filled with a maternal pride. She knew that these play sessions were not just for fun, but also an essential part of the cubs' development. Through their rough-and-tumble games, Bee, Bjorn, and Barrett were honing the skills they would need to survive and thrive in the wild. At one point, Bee found herself cornered by Bjorn, who towered over her with a playful growl. Thinking quickly, Bee reared up on her hind legs, swiping at her brother's face with her sharp little claws. Bjorn recoiled in surprise, giving Bee the opportunity to dart away and rejoin the chase. Barrett, who had been watching the exchange, let out an excited chitter and bounded towards Bee, the two cubs tumbling together in a tangle of fur and limbs. Ursula rumbled approvingly, her deep voice reassuring her offspring that their play was a natural and healthy part of their growth. As the sun began to set, casting the forest in a warm, golden glow, the bear family finally settled down to rest. Bee snuggled close to her siblings, their heavy, peaceful breathing lulling her into a contented slumber. She knew that with her family by her side, she was safe and loved, and that the wonders of the forest still had so much more to offer. Chapter 6: A Lesson in Fishing. The following day, Ursula led her family towards the banks of a nearby stream, her keen senses attuned to the potential sources of food that lay within the flowing water. Bee and her siblings followed closely, their curiosity piqued by the new environment. As they approached the stream, Bee could hear the soothing sound of the gently rushing water. She peered over the edge of the bank, her eyes widening at the sight of the colorful fish swimming below the surface. Ursula, sensing Bee's fascination, stepped forward and began to demonstrate the art of fishing. With remarkable agility and precision, the experienced bear plunged her massive paw into the water, effortlessly scooping up a wriggling trout in her grasp. Bee and her siblings watched in awe as Ursula tossed the fish onto the bank, where it flapped and thrashed about. Ursula then proceeded to swiftly pin the trout down with her paw, delivering a quick, decisive bite to the creature's neck to end its struggle. Bee inched closer, her eyes fixed on the lifeless fish. She tentatively reached out a paw, poking at the scaly creature and sniffing it curiously. Bjorn and Barrett soon joined her, the three cubs eagerly investigating this new source of sustenance. Ursula, satisfied that her cubs were familiarizing themselves with the fish, began to tear into the trout, ripping off chunks of the tender flesh and pushing them towards her offspring. Bee hesitantly took a bite, her taste buds igniting with the rich, savory flavor. Emboldened, she began to devour the fish, her hunger driving her to consume every last morsel. As the cubs feasted, Ursula continued to demonstrate her fishing prowess, plucking additional trout from the stream and adding them to the growing pile. Bee watched, mesmerized, as her mother's powerful paws effortlessly swiped through the water, her reflexes honed to perfection after years of experience. Occasionally, Ursula would pause to guide her cubs, gently nudging them towards the water's edge and encouraging them to try their own paws at fishing. Bee and her siblings eagerly complied, their clumsy attempts drawing amused rumbles from their patient mother. By the time the family had their fill, the bank was littered with the remains of their successful fishing expedition. Bee felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she and her siblings had contributed to the family's sustenance. With Ursula's guidance, she was slowly but surely learning the skills necessary to thrive in the forest. As the bears began to make their way back towards their den, Bee couldn't help but feel a growing appreciation for the incredible world that surrounded her. The forest was a vast, bountiful realm, and with her family by her side, she was ready to explore and discover all that it had to offer. Chapter 7: A Foraging Frenzy. In the days that followed, Bee and her siblings immersed themselves in the rhythms of the forest, eagerly learning from their mother's wealth of knowledge and experience. They spent their days foraging for a variety of nutritious foods, from succulent berries and tender roots to the rich, protein-packed fish they had discovered in the nearby stream. Ursula was a patient and attentive teacher, guiding her cubs with a gentle paw and a reassuring rumble. She showed them how to identify the edible plants and fungi that grew in abundance throughout the forest, and taught them the best techniques for extracting the most nourishment from their bounty. Bee found the process of foraging endlessly fascinating. She marveled at the sheer variety of edible treasures that the forest had to offer, from the tart, juicy huckleberries that grew in dense thickets to the sweet, creamy sap that oozed from the base of certain trees. As the family foraged, Bee and her siblings would occasionally spot other animals in the forest, from the chattering squirrels and industrious woodpeckers to the majestic elk and deer that grazed in the distance. Ursula would often pause to observe these creatures, sharing her insights and wisdom with her curious cubs. One particularly memorable day, the bear family stumbled upon a massive beehive, its busy inhabitants buzzing around the entrance. Bee and her siblings were initially wary of the swarming insects, but Ursula quickly reassured them, demonstrating how to carefully extract the golden, nutrient-rich honey without incurring the bees' wrath. Bee watched in awe as her mother deftly maneuvered around the hive, using her massive bulk to shield her cubs from the bees' stingers. With a few well-placed swipes of her paw, Ursula was able to dislodge the honeycomb, sending a cascade of glistening, fragrant nectar trickling to the forest floor. Bee and her siblings eagerly lapped up the sweet, sticky treat, their faces and paws soon covered in the golden liquid. Ursula chuffed in approval, clearly delighted to see her cubs enjoying the fruits of their foraging efforts. As the days wore on, Bee and her siblings grew increasingly adept at navigating the forest and identifying the various edible plants and animals that resided within. They learned to work together as a team, with Bjorn's size and strength complementing Barrett's agility and Bee's keen observational skills. Ursula watched on with pride, knowing that her cubs were well on their way to becoming self-sufficient, capable bears. She understood that the lessons she was imparting now would serve them well in the years to come, ensuring that they had the knowledge and skills to thrive in the ever-changing world of the forest.